Welcome, my name is Liis Kukkonen and this is Practitioner's Viewpoint. In this series of podcasts, I will be interviewing practitioners from different fields on how they see sedentary behavior and promotion of physical activity. Today I have the honor to introduce my guest, Jason Gootman. Jason is a Mayo Clinic certified wellness coach. He has a master's degree in exercise physiology and a certification in sports nutrition and strength and conditioning. Today we are going to talk about how to coach someone who wants to improve their biometrics like blood sugar levels, blood pressure, blood cholesterol levels, and on top of that, improve their overall well-being via lifestyle improvements. But within that topic, we are going to discuss what are the reasons people stop taking care of themselves and what are the most common reasons stopping people to thrive. So welcome, Jason.
Thanks again for having me, Liis.
Well, this is the second time that you are my guest here, and I'm really happy that you took the time to come back. Last time in October 2021, so just a few months ago, we spoke about motivation and the self-determination theory. But this time it's going to be more practical, I think. But there might be listeners that haven't been listening to our last talk. So could you, Jason, please once again tell us what got you interested in wellness coaching?
Well, like many, what got me interested in the wellness field more generally and wellness coaching were some struggles with my own well-being that really started as a teenager and being an overweight teenager. And to make a very long story very short, not having the tools internally or provided to me by someone else to deal with that in a constructive way. So, not to be dramatic, I dealt with it in some relatively destructive ways until I was in a bad place with my well-being in my mid-20s, and it was really the process of putting myself back together holistically that's really been the fuel for my interest in wellness.
So when you look back at that time now, what would you have wanted? What would help you?
Well, that's a remarkable question, and what I would say is that I've essentially become the person, both personally and especially professionally, that I would have liked to have known, or who would have been helpful to me. And I think to summarize what I could have used is someone who brings a great deal of acceptance and compassion and kindness to the process, along with some ways of working with both food and movement that are more about working with ourselves as opposed to sort of doing things to ourselves. And I think that summarizes it fairly well.
Okay, I think there is I've heard this maybe kind of a similar reason for starting working in a health or fitness or sports industries, or I don't know if it's in industry is not maybe a correct word for that, but many coaches say the same, that when they have been doing sports, they felt that they were not supported in a way they would have liked. And physical therapists, sometimes they might have a bad experience, or then of course the opposite is that they have met someone very inspirational, and they want to be like. But yeah, thanks for sharing this with us.
Sure.
So what are the problems that people come to see you? Usually I'm just thinking that quite many of us probably now it's the time of new beginnings, the beginning of new year. So what triggers people to really find a wellness coach?
Well, you know as well as I do that it's become very common to have what we call these lifestyle ailments, such as type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and more. Those are the most common. And the statistics reveal that A lot of people are struggling with those ailments, and the numbers are rising exponentially. So those are conversations that people are having with their physicians on a regular basis. And what often triggers someone to seek out my help is that is getting to a point where it's starting to impact how they feel, either literally in terms of how they feel physically, or it's starting to steal their peace of mind. They're starting to worry that they're going down a path that it isn't going to be pleasant. People often see what happens with either their parents or their aunts and uncles, or their sometimes it's even their age peers. They start to see people having hard times, and there's something interesting here. Is I think it's easy for wellness professionals or even people who are personally enthusiastic about wellness to look at people who are maybe not taking a lot of action in terms of these kinds of self-care and think that they're unaware, right? I'll often see a sort of exasperated comment on social media of like something in the direction of, don't people realize that high blood sugar leads to this and this and this problem? And my experience is most people do. It's not a lack of awareness of that fact. There are other things that make it challenging for a person to make the kinds of lifestyle improvements that they know would benefit them. What I'm trying to say is there's a gap between knowing that it's important and doing it for many people.
I definitely agree with you, and I think there's, it's all, we have a lot of research, and even there's so many gaps, different kinds of gaps people have. Not everybody has the same possibilities that maybe you or I have, or even if we think about like all the research about the reasons why people are not exercising, it's usually on white people, and it's even like the many minorities, or they are not even minorities, but huge groups of people are not included in this research. So we don't really know much about how culture affects, for example, exercising. So I agree that people often know, but there's so many other things that might be maybe at this time more important, or at least it maybe seems to people that it's more important than
yes, and I think,
eating healthier. Yeah.
Yes, I think this idea that there's something else to do that's more important is very interesting, and it allows some acceptance and some compassion into the conversation. Again, it's not ignorance. It's usually not also laziness. One way we could look at this is, one thing that we had talked about earlier that it seems like this could be a good time to bring it into the conversation is this. I've noticed some different personalities that struggle with self-care, and one I call strivers, and that is people who are working a lot. It's not complicated. They're striving for success in their careers, right?
Yep.
Now, one way of looking at that is this, what I would present as a false dichotomy, that they only care about work, they don't care about their well-being. I would challenge that way of thinking as they associate success at work with well-being. And of course, for all of us, it is on a level, right? If our income, savings, these kind of things drop to a certain level, we fundamentally can't be well, right? And I think we forget sometimes that it wasn't. You don't have to go back too many generations in most societies on Earth where success professionally was probably the most important thing to a person's well-being. Maybe tied with the second idea that I'll bring to the conversation. The other area that I mentioned to you, people struggle, is taking care of others. That often is parenting, grandparenting. That is something. It sometimes relates to career because it's sometimes what we call the helping professions,
Mm,
teachers,
yeah.
nurses. And again, it's not to me, it's not the idea that they're choosing to take care of others instead of themselves. It's that they associate taking care of others with their well-being in some way. And of course, that was
Mm,
part of not only our recent history, but also our evolution, that
mm.
caring for one another was critical to our survival. So
So
these are important sort of human traits that aren't easy to just put away because they actually have great value.
I agree, and it comes from from you probably come from a family where these it's important either to do well at your job or care for others. It's so much deeper, this value in in people. So I'm just really for our listeners, you have a website, which I thrive each day. Yes, and
Mhm.
you kind of have this really cool. I really like it. This I'm guessing that it's your observation
Correct.
of describing people uh, and not being judgmental. Yes, so it's like people are either martyrs, strivers, or avoiders. Was it like that? Yeah,
Correct. And then I think I have a fourth distinction of it's a clunky word, but thrivers. And the
yeah.
way that's what we're ultimately all leaning toward, which is that we are taking care of our career, we are taking care of others in our lives, uh, and we're taking care of ourselves in a balance. It's funny. I had a conversation with a client recently who is sort of building this muscle of taking better care of herself, and she's sort of simultaneously delighted that she's having this epiphany and this unfolding, and then she's also a little nervous that to put it dramatically, that she's becoming a narcissist, right? Because she's caring. And I was able to sort of, through our conversation, we were able to help her come to see that she has nothing to worry about of swinging. She hasn't stopped caring for her children. She hasn't stopped showing up to work. What she's done is found the intersection of those places, in a way that ultimately not only benefits her, and because as her well-being improves, she has more energy, she has more focus, she has more peace and joy. These are all things that she brings to her family and her work. Um,
So just before we go dive into these three types or four types of people more deeply, I'd like you to also maybe explain to our listeners that how do you see who is a wellness coach or well-being coach? What's the difference for like a personal trainer, or what is it that you do?
there are a few distinctions. One is that wellness coaching by nature is very collaborative.
Mm,
You could think of a wellness coach as walking alongside a client, in contrast to a professional being more of an authority. Uh, Now, wellness coaches can be authorities, and the way it works with the national board certification is that wellness coaches can give advice in realms like exercise and nutrition and other areas if they hold a national certification in those realms. But even when I work with clients on nutrition and exercise, I'm working very collaboratively versus prescriptively. So I'll ask. Let's use exercise as an example. I'll ask a client, meaning they'll describe their situation, their goals. From a more prescriptive model, it's all right. Let me go to the drawing board and make you a workout plan. Uh, we'll ultimately generate a workout plan for that person, but we'll co-create it. I'll ask questions. What kind of exercise do you most enjoy? What kind of exercise is most convenient for you? What has worked well for you in the past? Is there anything new you're interested in trying? Anything you've never done before that you're interested in trying? and really work together. So that's one distinction. Another distinction is that the field, the practice of wellness coaching is really rooted in the psychology of behavior change and habit formation. So we're often practicing something called motivational interviewing, and that's really helping draw out a person's intrinsic motivation. Whereas some of these other fields are more about providing the motivation, right? And you're doing your wellness coaching well. This might be a distinction that people could see in their minds. Imagine a professional of some kind enthusiastically, cheerleading for one of their clients. What you could see in that dynamic is that the source of motivation is coming from the professional. And in a wellness coaching arrangement, the wellness coach works very hard to not be doing the motivating, to allow the motivation to be drawn out of the client. And one reason this is important is it creates a more long-lasting motivation. People like you or I who have formed habits around these kinds of things, we don't necessarily need someone to motivate us. That's because the motivation has come from within us and has become part of our life. Whereas imagine that scenario of the person enthusiastically cheerleading. What you can see is as soon as they're taken out of the equation, the client, wilts like a flower that didn't get water or sunlight because their wellspring of motivation went away. So does that make some sense?
Definitely, yeah. I think during this coronavirus pandemic, we've seen a lot of talk where, at least here in Finland, what has happened is that there is like a bunch of people who have now more time to exercise. These are the enthusiasts that now they don't have to commute to work, so they can go running in the morning and they can do it lunchtime and even evening if they want to. And then there's a lot of people whose motivation has come from maybe a sports club or from a coach somewhere else. So and their levels of physical activity have come down. So I think that's what you have been talking about now. Yeah, kind of in a way.
Yes, it's very interesting. Yeah, and I've been thinking about this a little bit, and it's interesting that in our cultures, they're formed over the last several decades this idea around things like nutrition and exercise, maybe even well-being in general, that the way to succeed in those realms is to seek out an authority and sort of and get that advice. And what's interesting about that, when I think about that, is we don't do that in many other areas. This is the way I've been thinking about this in sort of a joking way. Would you go to an authority and say, tell me what neighborhood to live in? Most people would say, no, I want to choose what neighborhood I live in, right? Or would you go to an authority and say, I'm not going to choose, you tell me who to marry? Like we've learned in some of these other realms that we want to choose, right? But for some reason in nutrition and exercise, nutrition, for example, we used to learn generationally. We would learn how to eat from our parents, from our grandparents, from our great-grandparents. But something happened. It was the advent of nutrition as a field 100 or so years ago, or Western medicine in general, that has contributed to the idea that I don't know how to take care of my body. I have to give that power away to someone else. Now, I'm not saying that physicians, nutritionists, exercise physiologists, I'm two of those things, are not helpful, and that their expertise and their authority is not useful. It sure is. But there's something about that dynamic where, what makes this interesting is this isn't like, it's definitely not a moral or even an ethical judgment. It's a practical judgment. Something happens that affects motivation when we give our power away in that way. Whereas when we are making it's that idea that when a person owns a a home or owns a car, they take better care of it than if they're renting a home or renting a car.
Mm.
When we're making a lot of the free choices, maybe borrowing some of the expertise from these authorities, but it's our choice. There tends to be more of that pride of ownership in the
Mm.
choice. It's not a thing like a home or a car, and that seems to contribute greatly to both more motivation and more sustained motivation.
So just like it's really interesting. So let's say that there is this inner motivation, which is really deep, that you are trying to find when you are interviewing a person or talking to them.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that the same motivation is because we need motivation in many areas of our life. Like, for example, myself, I can just try myself here. So I have no problem to motivate myself to exercise. But then again, eating healthy always is much more difficult for me, or maybe being regular with eating.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that there is the same inner motivation that motivates us, um, doing several different things, or do you find like a different angle?
That's a really good nuanced question. I would think that I would say the answer is yes and no. If I asked you a question, a broad question of what would eating better and exercising more bring to your life, you're going to talk about what it's like to have better well-being and what
Mm.
that personally brings to your life. So in that sense, I think the answer would be the same or similar. But then this relates a little bit to what we talked about last time. The more proximal motivation, which doesn't have to be more complicated than how enjoyable is it.
Mm.
So getting to know you a little bit and reading between the lines in the question you asked a little bit, I'm going to make a guess that you really enjoy exercising.
Mm.
And so what I would probably explore with you would be because it sounds like you probably have that more distal motivation for eating well, but there's a gap. It's not as exciting or interesting or fun as maybe exercising, and we could probably find some ways to do that. And then if we succeeded in doing that, and over a period of time, it could become automatic, like exercising is for you.